In this short video presentation, I'm going to talk about gender and language. When we talk about sex, we're referring to the biological state of being male or female. Gender, on the other hand, refers to socially constructed roles and the expected behavior and interpretations of the behaviors of people that be believed to be of that gender. Men are expected to behave in certain ways, and certain behaviors are seen as unmanly. Gender, explains Mooney and Evans, is not something a person has. It is something that they accomplish through their behavior, clothing, habits, and speech. Scholars often characterize this as performing gender, such as man or woman. Of course, the idea that people are necessarily either male or female is a social construct as well. Many people feel they fall in between these categories, or are assigned one of these categories at birth, yet identify as another or as neither. Well, the ways in which language is involved in the social construction of sex would be an interesting discussion. This presentation focuses on how language socially constructs gender and how people perform their gender through language. We will also focus on how inequality is created and maintained through language in relation to gender. In their book, Language, Society, and Power, Mooney and Evans discuss a number of ways that inequality between genders is reinforced through language. Looking only at the lexical level, they note that there's an asymmetry in the use of terms to refer to women and those that refer to men, with the terms for women often having a negative or sexual connotation. They talk about how terms for men are often unmarked, with the terms for women being marked, and I'll talk more about what they mean by that in a minute. They also talk about binomials, pairs of words such as wife-husband or hostess-host, and what order these words usually appear in. Finally, they talk about semantic derogation, the process by which a word comes to have negative meanings over time, and how words with neutral or positive connotations that referred to women were often given negative connotations over time. When we look at terms that are used to describe women and terms that are used to describe men, we see a consistent asymmetry that reinforces inequality. A term like spinster, originally meaning someone who spins wool for a living, now means an unmarried woman, and this has a much more negative connotation than the word bachelor, used to describe an unmarried man. One of the ways in which we can see the negative usage is by looking at collocations. Collocations are words that commonly appear next to or with another word. So we could look at words that spinster commonly appears next to and compare it with the words bachelor commonly appears next to. Mooney and Evans write, common collocations for bachelor are eligible bachelor or bachelor pad, and these collocations reflect a positive view of single life for men. Spinster, on the other hand, is more likely to be collocated with lonely or old, and this suggests an image of an older, unattractive woman. Similarly, the term master is used to refer to men, but it doesn't have the same sexual connotations as the word mistress. Compare also the asymmetry in the selection of titles such as Mr. or Mrs. Mr, referring to men, does not encode marital status, while Mrs. and Miss do. The alternative title, Ms., could be read as having political implications, but at the very least, it indicates a decision not to reveal one's marital status. Men don't have to make the decision whether or not to reveal their marital status. Women, in choosing which of these titles to use, do. So men don't need to make this decision, thus an asymmetry exists between the distribution of these titles. I mentioned marked terms before. Mooney and Evans describe a marked term as one that has a relationship with a neutral and normal counterpart. For example, if we were to say a male nurse to refer to men who do this work, but nurse when describing the role in general or when it is done by women, this would make male nurse a marked term. So a marked term is one that has a relationship with a neutral and normal counterpart, male nurse versus nurse. Usually, however, it's the term that refers to women that is marked. Actor, waiter, and host are used to refer both to the roles in general and to the role as performed by men. Actress, waitress, and hostess refer solely to the roles as performed by women. The unmarkedness of terms used to refer to men positions men in these occupations as normal and expected, while women in the same occupations are positioned as requiring explicit marking. You may have heard people qualify other professions with female or woman, such as a female doctor or a woman lawyer. These further illustrate the extent to which the markedness is alive in our language. The inequality created by this markedness is compounded when the connotations are also asymmetrical, with the terms used to refer to women also having negative connotations. Mooney and Evans cite a study that examined the order in which binomials referring to women and men appear. Binomials are pairs of nouns that commonly appear together. Uh, Binomials are pairs of nouns that commonly appear together, such as salt and pepper. There's a very strong preference for a word order in which the noun referring to men comes before the noun referring to women. The study also notes that in pairs of nouns where there's a disparity in power relations, such as teacher and student, parent and child, or master and servant, it's the more powerful role that comes first. If the first noun is generally the one with greater power, then seemingly innocuous phrases like men and women reinforce gender inequality in a rather subtle everyday way. Mooney and Evans also talk about semantic derogation. They explain that semantic derogation refers to the process by which a word comes to have negative meanings over time. And this may result in asymmetry, as with the example of spinster, which went from being a neutral term describing a job, but as the job was usually done by women and language reinforces gender inequality, it came to have a negative connotation. Two other examples might be sluts and witches. A slut used to be a woman who was untidy or dirty in appearance. It came, however, to refer to sexual habits. Words to describe men who are sexually promiscuous don't have the same negative connotations. So there's some asymmetry there as well. So semantic derogation and asymmetry. When men and women join a slut walk, they're attempting to reclaim the word from the negative connotations and reinvest it with positive ones. The term witch tends to have a connotation of evil in a way that wizards does not, and this wasn't always the case. The term witch simply originally meant a female magician. The term has been subject to the process of semantic derogation over time. Imagine that you've decided to perform gender differently. If you usually behave as social constructions of manhood say men should behave, imagine you've chosen, even for one day, to be a woman. Likewise, if you usually perform womanhood, imagine you've decided to be a man. You may not need to imagine, you may have experience doing this. How would you, or did you, use language differently? So how would you use language differently if you were performing the opposite gender? Many claims exist about how men and women use language differently. Take a minute and look at these 3 questions. How would you answer them? What evidence do you have to support your answer? How do you expect most people will answer? Linguists have conducted research into these questions and have found that the data does not always support the stereotypes. Women do use more tag questions than men, however, they do not necessarily use them to express uncertainty. Tag questions can be used because one does not know the answer, or because one wants to invite someone into the conversation. If I said to a girl who has just been bullied by another girl, "That wasn't very nice of her, was it?" I wouldn't be expressing uncertainty. I would be expressing sympathy and inviting the child to express her feelings. If I said to a friend, "They have vegan dishes at that restaurant, don't they?" when I really wasn't sure, that's a different use of a tag question. Women do use more tag questions than men, but they're more likely to do so to invite people into the conversation, not to express uncertainty. Men tend to use tag questions only to express uncertainty. The belief that women gossip more is widespread. The stereotype is so strong that if we were to listen to women having a conversation about another woman who is not present, we would probably consider it gossip. If we were to hear two men having the exact same conversation, we might not think of it as such. Research, however, shows that both men and women equally engage in this form of communication. Furthermore, gossip has a strongly negative connotation, but sharing information about neighbors, friends, and family with others could be a way of building familiarity, gaining sympathy, or protecting others. It's been defined as something that women do, and as something that's largely negative. The evidence doesn't support either belief. So who talks more, women or men? As with the other questions, the answer is more nuanced than the stereotypes would suggest. Research suggests that men actually talk more in public. In meetings, classrooms, conferences, and other places where the powerful get to speak and speaking is a way of exercising and gaining power, men talk more. In private, in the home, with friends, women tend to talk more. As a professor in a faculty of education in which the majority of the students are women, I find that even if there are only 3 men in the class and 20 women, those 3 men will talk almost as much as all the women combined. Mooney and Evans cite a number of linguists who find that the issue isn't that women talk more, rather, that women's talk is seen as illegitimate. It isn't that women talk too much, it's that any talk from women is considered too much. Perhaps you consider this to be harsh, or perhaps you think I might have overstated my case. Next time you're in a public space, such as a meeting or a conference, keep a tally of who speaks and whether it is a woman or a man. Note who interrupts. Listen for tag questions. The ways in which language is used to perform gender and construct gender are very interesting, and you can witness them in action in your daily life. I was at a meeting of the Canadian Association of Studies of Women in Education, which is basically a group that takes feminist analysis, does feminist analysis of educational systems, of women in educational systems, of access to educational systems, that kind of thing. There were 10 women and 2 men in the room. I kept a tally of who talked more, including myself. Although there were only 2 men and 10 women, and although the point of the meeting was to discuss women and access and power in education, the men talked 30% of the time, and, between the other man and I, we interrupted more than all the other women